welcome to another episode of First Down by CoachTools. Today I'm here with Jacob Norlock, the Vice President over at GPS Database. Thanks for coming on, Jacob.
Hey, Justin, thanks so much for having me on. Excited to be on the show. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. So Jacob, he was a college football player over at Division III Cal Lutheran,
Yep.
and we actually met. It was around this time last year at the AFCA Conference. So to kick things off, Jacob, can you just share with the audience a little bit about your background and how you ultimately got involved with the sports data industry?
Yeah, for sure. It was great to meet you. Glad our booths were posted up next to each other and had an opportunity to chat and learn more about your company as well. My story starts back really when I played at Cal Lutheran. Coming out of high school is probably a step too slow to play at the Division I level, and certainly had a love for the game, and so had the opportunity to go play for Cal Lutheran. I think that my story and the intersection where my passion and love for football and data has really come together probably goes back to my sophomore year. I was the starting middle linebacker, but also being a small Division III school was also on kickoff and punt and kickoff return and punt return. And about 4 days before our first game, we were doing a simple cross blitz and popped my knee. And I think that had a fair bit to do with overuse. And so for me, ultimately ended up having surgery and kind of missing that entire year. Now, at that point in time, I had no idea technology existed to be able to track athletes and the load that they were incurring. My career then progressed, and for a few years worked in sports wearable technology and understood like there's an entire market that exists that tracks these athletes to better understand the mileage that they're putting on and how we can use that information to further reduce risk of injury. And so that's kind of where my interest, obviously coming from someone that was overused and injured, to now where I'm at today with GPS Database is an opportunity to help coaches and players better understand the data and how all the data that we are collecting, as you know, there's thousands of data points. And I think it's really cool when you think about a simple sport like football and all the different pieces of technology that touch football, things that you guys are doing over at CoachTools, maybe from the coaching side, things that we're doing that intersect with player performances, the way coaches train athletes, even from dissecting play-by-play video. There's so many other things that are involved to make the entire program work. And so for me, the interesting part about working here at Dataviz is where data then becomes useful, where the gap between data collection and data application is bridged instantaneously. And certainly it's cool to be in an environment where you're using AI and machine learning, especially these days, to be able to deliver instant insights to coaches.
And it's really interesting just hearing about your story. And I know you mentioned it to me last year, but just reminding me that you also got hurt when you were, early on in college. And I had a similar situation playing at a Division III school in Gettysburg College. And exactly what you were saying. I mean, now more than ever, there's just so many opportunities for coaches to not only track data, but actually have technology that's going to help them apply it. So can you just, and obviously you've had a lot of experience in this field. So can you just share with the audience, what are some actionable insights and maybe an example or two that would be helpful for a coach to know?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of what we do here at DataViz was to begin storing things like GPS data. For coaches that are unfamiliar, it's the sports bra that guys wear that tracks things like their distance, how fast they ran, how far they ran, what speeds they did that, the load that they incurred, their accelerations or decelerations. And so as a company, we kind of started ingesting that and heart rate data to then apply that information with insight so that coaches knew, what does that data actually mean for us? How do we use that information to change maybe something at practice tomorrow? A classic example of that would be, our insights will analyze, if we think about 50, 70, 80, 100 players on a roster, every time data gets uploaded into our system, will essentially analyze that data across that baseline for that individual and then offer insights across what needs to happen. So at a team level, insights could be how today's session compared to yesterday or to last Tuesday, right? So I want to know in game day prep how today comparative to that same day preparation from last week. At an individual level, it'll then begin to analyze players that are hit new top speeds, for example, players that haven't hit 90% of their top speed in the last 7 days. So an important sports science principle is to make sure that athletes are exposed to that 90% and above of their top speed at least once a week. If you don't do that, eventually over time, your high end velocity, your top speeds will begin to decline because you're not exposing that athlete to those high ends. Now, I want to caveat here, I'm not a sports scientist, okay? So I'm not a guy who's necessarily prescribing that. But for us, we wanted to share, hey, you've got these players who haven't hit 90% in 7 days, 10 days, 15 days, 21 days. And so when you talk about how data leads us to application with our insights, which are provided in 2 minutes to coaches, I can go out as a wide receiver coach and see, hey, here are the 4 guys that when I'm doing indie peer today, they have to have a max velocity effort in. And so now it's data that is transpiring into application. And then a big thing for us is using a sports science term called the acute to chronic workload ratio. It's a few different variables of how you can do that. And for us, just being able to analyze essentially if a player is overworked or underworked, probably the simplest way to put that. And so for us in the instantaneous reporting that we deliver, showing coaches, hey, these are your 4 players that could be overworked and at risk for injury. Now is an opportunity to step in and possibly make a change, whether that's reducing their sprint volume or their overall distance, just to make sure that you're not overexposing them to the risk of injury, as I was, X amount of years ago.
Yeah. And before we started talking, I looked on the website, and one of the big things is just saving coaches time for you. So can you just talk about how you save coaches time and what the application of something like this would look like for
Yeah,
maybe
for sure.
maybe like a small college like Howell Lutheran or Gettysburg?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a couple things. One, anytime that you tell a coach, hey, this is going to take more time, of which you already don't have, there's an instant like no dice type of thing. So for us, we recognize coaches are being pulled in a million different directions, especially during the season. Whether it's the strength coach that's doing programming, the position coach that's trying to figure out their drills, or ultimately the whole coaching staff that's better preparing for their opponent come up on Saturday. What we realize is when you insert data collection into that process, it becomes its own bear. I have to figure out all this data that we are collecting. How does that make sense to us? And how does that help us make decisions? Through our process of automation, ultimately a process that coaches could spend 30, 40, 50, even an hour analyzing that data to come to the results and the conclusions that I've already shared, what we can do in 2 minutes. And so when you think about that, if I can give a coach 28, 58 minutes back of their day every single day, we'd probably both agree that there's probably better things that they could do with a half hour than crunch numbers and data. Maybe that's picking up the phone for a recruiting call. Maybe it's getting home to like have dinner with their family during the season. That's a huge win for us. So for us, creating efficiencies when it comes to how much time they're spending putting these reports together, whether that's in Excel with kind of, pivot tables, we're just creating a ton of efficiencies where stuff is done in literally minutes. And then they can go about their day doing the things that are going to either help the program or essentially help themselves at home.
Yeah. Well, that's a great philosophy, and that's obviously part of what we do with CoachTools is
Yeah.
essentially save coaches time. And other than just efficiency and effectiveness, what else does your product and like just in general, what else do you do for coaches?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a couple of things. Obviously, we started in how do we create efficiencies and create like automation where time has existed. As we worked with more programs, and a great example is one of our partners at Georgia Tech football, who we sat down with, had the opportunity to be at their big upset homecoming win over North Carolina a few weeks ago. Sat down with Jordan Diaz, who's director of speed over there, and was able to understand that they're collecting a lot of different data sources. So we've talked a little bit about GPS today, but they also have force plates that guys are jumping off of, which tells you things like jump height, being able to see imbalance between left and right. They also have things called VBT, or velocity-based training. This is all stuff, by the way, Justin, that I did not have at Cal Lutheran. I don't know if you had it at Gettysburg, but
Definitely
we
not.
didn't have
No.
any of this technology back then. And so, velocity-based training, essentially to look at the way that you're moving the bar, how much weight you're moving. And essentially for us, we recognize that GPS was great, but programs are collecting a lot of other data sources. And so we then ingest all of that data, where we're creating actionable insights from all of the data, not just reporting from your GPS, but what is the force plate data that you're getting telling you on a team or individual level? What about the VBT data you're collecting? Oh, you're using timing gates. Are you doing other sort of testing? All that information for a lot of coaches is in some sort of spreadsheet or some database warehouse where the data just goes to live, but there's no action from it. So for us, we started in the automation piece, helping save efficiencies and create time back for coaches. Now we're aggregating data to do that across all technology that they are collecting. And one of the big things that I'm super pumped about, we just launched about a month ago. So much of data collection, Justin, is what has already happened. What did we do in yesterday's practice? What did we do on the force plates 30 minutes ago? What we've built out is a predictive analytics system that will utilize your drills and the practice periods that you did yesterday to predict the loads, the speeds, the intensities that you're going to see tomorrow, the next day, the day after that, with the projection of that acute to chronic. So a coach could basically plan practice on Monday all throughout the week and see the team is going to be really, really high on their sprint volume on Thursday. And this playing at a Division III school, this is applicable across all divisions, is that, if we are overexposed going into a game, it's not always a ton of depth to step in and fill behind that if someone is fatigued or cramping or ultimately gets injured. And so while I think it's important, we're talking some of the Division I and professional high-end athletes, I also think it's incredibly important at the Division III level, where there may not be a ton of reserves to step into that role. How do we keep our athletes healthy as long as possible, as deep as possible, especially as we start to get into conference championship play here and ultimately the playoffs?
Yeah. Well, that's all great stuff. And, just the fact that you're not only just organizing data, but helping the coaches apply it is something that I think is invaluable. So what advice would you give maybe just a coach at any level who is looking to figure out because there's so many things out there, like what
Sure.
should they use and how could they start using that?
For sure. I think that there's a couple of things. I think the biggest thing is ask the question first, why are we using this technology, right? There's a little bit of keeping up with the Joneses when it comes to applying or to purchasing technology. Some use it for recruiting, which is, hey, that's fine. That's fair. I think that coaches can kind of get themselves into a little bit of a, hey, we've bought technology, but it sits on the shelf. We don't actually apply the data. So I think that there's a big question about how is this data going to help us make better decisions? For some coaches, they may not know the answer to that. And that's where we certainly can step in and figure out, well, what's important to you? What are you trying to achieve? What does the game schedule look like? And how do we build a plan in place that helps us achieve those goals? And so I think for any coach looking into technology, whether it's the GPS, the force plates, the VBT, it just asks the question, what is this going to do for us? Because they all do things differently. And how are we going to apply it? How is this going to help create change, whether that's in what we're doing in a practice drill or looking at our collective practice week leading up to a game? How is this going to create change? If it's tough to answer that question, do some deeper dive into that technology, whatever you're looking to do. And certainly, I'm happy to be a resource. For us, we're working with literally every type of provider across every type of technology. So happy to be a resource to offer my insights on the technology as well.
Got it. Well, thank you very much, Jacob. Any last words you wanted to share with the audience today?
No, I just want to say I appreciate you having me on. It's always a pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you maybe at AFCA or another show. Obviously enjoyed meeting you and watching your guys' progress over at CoachTools. And no, I just appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. Likewise, Jacob. Best of luck.
All right, thank you. See ya.